All right, welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. This is our season finale, last episode of the 2024 season. We had a couple weeks there. We didn't get to publish one. Evan's been all over the place. I've been all over the place. So we're happy to be able to sit down and record another episode with one of our favorite guests who has been on the podcast a few times before. We're excited to have him back on. So here in just a second, we're going to hear from Colby Hall, who is the executive director of SOAR. But just like we recapped in our 300th episode, Evan, we've done a lot in the 2024 season here. We've put a lot of effort and time into increasing our quality of production, changing up our content strategy a little bit. And actually, by the time this episode airs, we'll have had our yearly Middle Tech retreat, and we'll be coming back refreshed and with a strategy for 2025. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, always trying to improve. And next year is going to be another one of those years where we experiment and figure out what's working and what's not. But I think this year, 2024, was a really great year. We grew the team and figured out new strategies that are working and figure out some things that weren't working. But that's always part of the process.
That's right. And you just got back from some meetings up in DC for your company. You recovering all right? I know you had some food poisoning on the way back, which we were laughing about. Sounds miserable.
Yeah, no, I'm almost 100%, not quite there, but I just got back from DC. We're getting ready to launch the company I've been working on last year or so, and Q1 we're going to be launching that. And so we had meetings up there, customer meetings, and it was a good trip. We had myself and my co-founder up there and met with some advisors, and DC is a cool town. We were mostly in Annapolis, but I got food poisoning at some point, and that was pretty miserable and had to fly back with it. But I'm almost back.
Well, it'll be fun to start next season talking a little bit about your company once you guys have launched it. We should go back and do the kind of side by side of, you were talking about launching the company right at the beginning of last season, of this season. So a year of progress, excited for you to get that out to the world. I know I'm very excited about it. But anyway, let's get to this episode. So like I mentioned, we're talking with Colby Hall today. So if you've remember our interviews with Colby in the past, he is the executive director of SOAR, which is another of the KY innovation hubs focused on the Eastern Kentucky region. And we wanted to have Colby back on today because they have recently been awarded a $40 million grant from the U.S. Economic Development and Administration for a recompete pilot program. So before we hear from Colby, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middle Tech is also supported by Huntsicker, an impact venture studio based in Lexington, Kentucky. Huntsicker is creating companies out of the ordinary by founding and funding the next generation of purpose-driven startups. They partner with founders to create indispensable solutions to the world's most fundamental problems. On a quarterly basis, they host an invite-only intimate gathering called Fireside Convos, where attendees representing a wide network of stakeholders in the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem discuss timely topics, including the role of AI for startups out of Kentucky and the challenges of identifying and attracting talent. To be considered as a guest, visit huntsicker.co/fireside to apply. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with them. All right, Colby, welcome back on to the Middle Tech Podcast. How's it going?
Guys, I'm doing great. How are you all? Besides the food poisoning, Evan?
We're great, man. Evan's recovering. We're getting a season finale episode out there. We're excited for you to be that season finale episode. I was going back last night as we were making some of the notes for this, and it doesn't seem like it's been this long, but the last time you were on the podcast was back in 2021 for episode 129.
That's crazy.
Now we're in the 300s.
Well,
So
congratulations to you guys for what you've built, and I'm a huge fan of the podcast. It's always an honor to be with you all. I mean, I have such admiration for you guys having full-time jobs and doing this. That's a lot, but it's super important to Kentucky building out its startup ecosystem. You guys know that better than me, and it just takes a lot of work. And I'm sure you guys know it too. But you go back and look at your early episodes, and not that, but to see your all's own improvement, your production value over time, like you guys have really come a long way. So it's always great to be with you all. Congratulations on all your success.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And, it's been fun to continue working with your team. Most recently, we got to be a part of your all's SOAR Summit down in Pikeville. We got to do a live episode with some entrepreneurs, and also put on an AI workshop that Evan got to lead. So always a lot of fun, not only doing the podcast with you guys, but also working with the organization that you're now leading. And you've been executive director at SOAR for 4 years now. So seems like that time has flown by. I remember when you first got that position. Now I'm seeing all the great stuff that's coming out of your leadership there. But I wanted to start things off, 4 years in that role. If you had to give, a theme or a few themes to those 4 years of leadership, what would they be?
Yeah, I guess time flies when you're having fun. It is kind of crazy to think about. 4 years ago, I was packing stuff up in a U-Haul, moving north from Buckhead, Atlanta, Georgia, moving to Betsy Lane in Floyd County. You just kind of never know what life's gonna throw at you. I'd honestly, Logan, probably I'd split it up really two. I would say kind of years 1 and 2 were foundational. Eastern Kentucky is such a rich place with characters and organization. Like there's so many layers to it, right? And it just took a while to kind of get my feet set and kind of understand what's going on, the things that are working well, what people want. I mean, diagnosing. There's just a lot to it, right? So I think about I had no idea what I was coming into 4 years ago, and slowly over time, you start to get more and more of a handle on it, or maybe you understand that you'll never get a full handle on it, so that helps you handle it better. If that makes sense. So really those kind of first 2 years were really just kind of getting my feet set and kind of understanding the environment that SOAR operated and kind of assessing the opportunities, right? And that kind of led for years 3 and 4. I feel like looking back, were really growth years, because we were at such a unique moment in that post-COVID world where there was a lot of federal funding available for nonprofits like us to do some of the work that we lead, helping out some of our, underrepresented or left behind populations, low income, substance use disorder, a lot of the challenges, we have great people, but there's certain barriers they face in different parts of their lives. And so years 3 and 4, we were super aggressive with funding and what we went after. And it really led to explosive growth. I think, 4 years ago, we were at 9 FTEs, and today talking to you all, we're at 28, almost 30. And obviously the EDA grant, that's going to put us, hopefully in the middle of the next year, close to 70 because of the opportunity that we have. So a lot of explosive growth and years 3 and 4. It's been a lot of fun. It's been hard. And then I think, looking ahead, man, it's going to be execution, right? We've got all these great resources. We've got this great program built that we're excited about. We're not going to be able to solve everything in the 5 years that we're going to be but can we get the ship turned in the right direction? Can we learn some cool things to build and to scale, right? Can we use this to leverage ourselves into a big national profile, right? Where we're getting the attention of some big national philanthropic funders. Really the sky's the limit, man. And so it's been a good 40 years, but I can't wait for, what's ahead of us and what it means for the region that we serve.
So for the audience that might not be as familiar with how, these grant programs work and the federal funding works, give us some more insight on, that grant you all won, what that process looks like. And then on the back end of that, what from a high level is that being allocated towards?
Yeah, well, it's funny, right? There's a lot of misconceptions around how grants work just in general, right? Somebody put it to me this way when I first started, that easy money isn't free and free money isn't easy. Right. And so It's so true with grants. And every agency, public, private, they've all got their different processes they follow, different ways of going about it. Most federal grants, right? It starts with a notice of funding opportunity or an FOA that kind of lines out like all the fine print of, what the program is, what it's trying to fund, kind of all the basic details, kind of tells you exactly what to do. Obviously, the private sector grants, they're typically a little, they're less bureaucracy, less red tape, a little bit easier. But obviously, the big one, this big, it's actually, Logan, I think $41,672,000, just to be specific. But this was a big one, right? This was unique. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. This program, which is called the Recompete Pilot Program, Evan, was a first-time program underneath the CHIPS Act. So the CHIPS Act that a lot of folks were familiar with, I think, whose core purpose was to bolster the domestic supply chain of America's ability to be able to produce high-tech chips. This was folded into that as, I think, the Department of Commerce's way to think about how are you supporting the transition of certain rural areas where chronic underemployment or unemployment, what are we doing for those specific areas, right? Probably not going to get a foundry in Eastern Kentucky, if we're being honest. I mean, there's certain things, but like, it was nice that I do think the government did a pretty good job of thinking about those areas that aren't going to get one of these or receive much of that. How are we helping them through this, if that makes sense? So this was a multi-phase process. They appropriated $200 million to it. So like, that was the first thing that caught our eye. I remember when the announcement first hit, kind of middle of June 2023, I'm sitting there reading it. I mean, you're just like, yeah, we're going to get this. I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, but like, you're reading it and you're like, I feel like this is kind of built for us. This is really getting at like some of the root causes of some of what I think are the region's biggest challenges it has to deal with. Like, this wasn't just, a cool program we get to do for a couple of years, do some good work, pack it up and go. Like, no, like, this was getting deep and like into the complicated, messy stuff of like how you're going to have to build the region back one person at a time, right? With some huge resources too. I mean, up to $50 million or around $50 million was like going to be like kind of the top prize. So it was multiple phases, phase one, phase two, really kind of happened over 12 months. Evan, to answer your question, the heart of the grant, right, is something, a problem called the prime age employment gap. So economists would denote that kind of your filet mignon of your workforce are people in prime working age years. So that those are 25 to 54 years old. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? For most places, you're out of college, like you're in the workforce. Like, those are you should be building wealth, starting families, buying a home. Like, that's where all that should be happening. What's interesting is, like, nationally, the country is at, this is an issue across the country. Like, we're seeing records amount of mainly men falling completely outside the workforce. So that means they're neither working nor looking for work. Most are not in any sort of education or training. So we have lots of men that are just kind of here, right? Finding a way to survive, but really not being put to the productive use that a community would need. So nationally, this is a problem. I think if I understand the literature right, the country is at the same level we were kind of around the Great Depression. So men have been falling outside of the workforce at record levels. The reason it hasn't been too big of an issue, if you look, is women have been entering the workforce at such a level that it's more or less replaced the amount of males that have fallen off, which is interesting. Women really started entering, I think, in the 80s, and they've kind of, I guess, covered the exodus of men from the workforce, which is fascinating. But in our region in Eastern Kentucky, it's a very acute problem. So nationally, this prime age employment rate's about 83%. So like 83% of individuals 25 to 54 are either working or looking for work, right? So that's an important difference there, not to talk your all's heads off, but like, to be considered unemployed, right, you have to be looking for work. That's why the unemployment rate's a little misleading, because the vast majority of people that are not working are not looking for work, but they get missed in that metric, right? So when you look at overall labor force participation, that's capturing the group of people above a certain age group. And I think it controls for like, folks that are institutionalized or active duty military under 16. But when you look at our region, 83% nationally for the group of this 25 to 54 age group, 83% nationally, our 12 counties where we're focused on, it's closer to like 51%. So like,
oh my gosh,
almost half of people in the prime working age of their years of their life are not working. And so it lends to a lot of big questions, right, about what that means for the region, the communities, the families of these individuals, and the individuals themselves. And like, I guess the last thing I'll say, I'll turn it back and we can go from here. But like the big question that we're after, right? Like we're excited about the programming, guys. We're excited about the training and some of the sector focuses, which I think you'll call out. But more so than any of that at a deeper level, and not to like, but it's about helping people find purpose again, right? Like I know you guys have had lots of interesting conversations around AI and human and what does it mean to be like a living being, and what does a person, I mean, I think if we really strip down all of that, like we as humans, like we have to have purpose. We have to have something that where we can see, I think we're built to that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. Some people find that in different ways, but like our thesis is like, it's really, really hard to have that deep seated purpose without gainful employment. And we feel like that's a big piece of some of our region's issues that we're tackling. So this grant's allowing us, this program over the next 5 years is really allowing us to get deep into it, guys, finding some new interventions that can work, that show promise, rigorously measuring those, and then after 5 years, finding ways to sustain that work because we've been able to show some good stuff doing things differently. So not to talk your heads off, but like we're super excited about it and what we're doing.
It's very helpful context, and just I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more, but from what I was reading, it sounds like you guys are really trying to address some of the foundational issues that are likely causing this underemployment with this age group. And I mean, we could go in so many different directions kind of talking about this issue in general, and women stepping in to kind of replace that and what that means for raising families. And then you get into how is a community built, and if people aren't having this kind of gainful employment, how are they able to raise family and establish? And I think if you guys are going kind of after that, what are the core causes, not just the symptoms of it? I'm excited to kind of hear more about how you guys are thinking of addressing that. And I know kind of the theme of this Reconvene pilot is a lot around, our economy in Eastern Kentucky was very much built on the coal industry. That's how money started flowing into our economies kind of earlier on. Now, obviously, that's not as much of a thing, and it's likely going to continue to decline. I'm curious, what other industries are you guys kind of looking at right now? I know that like energy and tech and healthcare were mentioned, which are all can be fairly broad. But how are you guys thinking about building a new kind of economic identity that can employ these people that we're talking about?
So obviously you're right that mining related industries and the industries they supported for decades have been the primary industry, right, in the region. And it was really painful as that industry declined over time. I do think it's important to point out, though, and I think we might have talked about this back on episode 129, is when you actually look at the data, like production or employment in coal mining in Eastern Kentucky peaked in the 40s. So in production peaked in the 90s. Coal mining was just like any other industry, guys. There were technology came in and operators became more efficient. They came, less dependent on human labor. They were able to increase output with less labor. I mean, Evan, it fits right into the conversation we had the other day around, AI and some of what you're building. So it's definitely true. I guess the point I want to make there, Logan, always is that even when coal was at its peak, right, like there's still some structural iniquities, or there's been other stuff going on that have held the region back. Mainly it is. I mean, so I guess I just want to make sure the picture is, even when coal was booming, not everything was perfect here. Like there were still most indicators we were still lagging behind. But obviously it came to a new level as this industry eroded over time. So getting to like, where are we going? I think it's important to note, like, nobody's really figured out generational poverty, like how to solve it. Like for a lot of different reasons. I mean, it's not easy. Like somebody said, like, you think, sending something to outer space is hard, like try solving generational poverty. And it is, because I mean, it's so unique to the individual and what they're facing, all these decisions, like nobody really has this figured out. But there is a lot of evidence in some strategies that do work. And we're trying to leverage some of what we know works based on kind of what we've read and try not to recreate the wheel, while also trying to propose new ideas and new strategies. Like take healthcare, for example. That's something, again, I'm not an economist, but I think the idea of a sector-based strategy, something that's built around kind of your key industry in the region. You have these jobs, you work closely with employers, you set up training, and you kind of create that direct pipeline. I mean, it's kind of common sense, but that's what they call a sector-based partnership. That's definitely the strategy that we're employing, deploying, Evan and Logan, with healthcare. Healthcare is the number one job creating industry in the region today. It's about a fourth of the overall GDP. In our project areas, I would say between our two largest employers, Pikeville Medical Center and Appalachian Regional Healthcare, they're project leads, so they're kind of partners with us on this grant. They're both owning a specific project. They probably have 1,000 to 1,500 openings today, mostly for the types of jobs where folks coming from this gap could fill. So not necessarily like nursing's always going to be one at the top of the list, but a lot of the support roles. So think like if you've ever been in a hospital, like technicians, radiation technicians, ultrasound technicians, phlebotomists, the people that take your blood, right? Like CNAs. I mean, even some of like your administrative positions, hospitals are kind of like factories, right? Just for people and instead of so like there's a ton of opportunity there. There's jobs to be filled. It's kind of I guess oxymoronic, ironic, however you want to say it, right? These folks have 2,000 jobs, 1,500 jobs, 1,000 jobs they can't fill today. And I can tell you, we've got 34,000 people in this gap that aren't looking for work. It's like, what gives, right? So we're going to try to get some of that low hanging fruit there, because that's the best example of a sector-based direct partnership. And so like that was definitely at the top of the list in terms of our application. Some of the other things that you mentioned, Logan, like some of the energy related projects. I mean, again, that's what's happening in the region right now. I know you guys have had several large scale solar developments. There's a huge pump storage hydropower project, energy storage in Bell County. We know those are jobs on the horizon that are coming. A lot of those are construction project-based jobs, which we would love to have kind of baseload employment, kind of like a nurse, where a nurse goes into work, he or she stays in that community all day, every day. Like to me, like that's the ideal type of job we want. But hey, anything is going to help. And we need to have that type of skilled trade workforce in general. There's shortages across the board. And so training folks for those types of positions, there's a lot of ways that those skills are transferable. Some of the remote work types thing, just answering that real quick, right, gets to the point of there is a large mismatch between the demand of total job seekers in the region. It's about 34,000 that are in this gap, and the supply of total jobs available. Aggregate, when we looked at the numbers in our 12 counties, it was about 8,500 job postings over the last year. So not total jobs, but like in theory, like how many jobs are available if we had all 34,000 of these people at the table ready to go. There were about 8,500, 8,400, 8,600 total jobs that were posted. It's like that in of itself is drastically, less than the total number of job seekers. It's actually probably a little less because like a lot of those, the vast majority, maybe upwards of 75%, were entry level, like retail jobs, which aren't bad, right? But that's a stepping stone. Like that's not a job where somebody can come in, like build a career, build wealth, start a family. Like you can't do that at like a minimum wage job. Like minimum wage jobs have to lead somewhere. So the remote work piece, Evan, and look, is just a bet, right? Like we have to find some way to import tens of thousands of jobs quickly. And we need to be able to do that like yesterday. And as I'm for an all above approach in terms of like economic and community development. I hope every industrial park across the region gets full one day. Every spec building, I want it all filled. But like, I think if you looked, even if I could snap my fingers and make that happen now, it still wouldn't be at the level of that gap, right? When you're thinking about 34,000 total people, and that number's growing every day. Like, we can show new people are entering that prime age employment gap. So it's you have to stop the bleeding, and then you actually have to shrink it if you're going to get caught up. And the bottom line is we need more jobs. We need more good paying jobs. So I'm not saying remote work is the silver bullet. What I'm saying is I've yet to find an alternative strategy that is a solution at the size of the problem, if that makes sense. So that like you're not investing a bunch of time, energy, and resources into one or two projects that result in 150, 300 jobs, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but we're talking about 34,000, right? Where, your deficit at that point is still about 34,000. We understand that remote work, there's, you're always reading an article where this company's sending people back here, this group's sending people back here. We get all that. In terms of 34, like, we just need to capture a small percentage of that overall opportunity. And these are jobs that are across sectors, across skill levels. And in theory, if you find a job on LinkedIn and you meet the qualifications, anybody can apply for it, right? So there's more nuance there, guys, but that's more of a forward-looking bet that we're making as a lot of this broadband deployment money gets out the door, as Starlink continues to come online. Like, the infrastructure's there, right? And it creates a tremendous opportunity if we can find a way to show something that can scale to connect these opportunities to the people here. It's just, like I said, I haven't found another idea or another way to go about doing that. And so those were kind of the three, why we leaned into those three things.
Yeah. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I know you guys were, I believe, one of the first in the region to pilot some Starlink technology to provide internet access. We don't have to dive into it too much, but I am curious if there's any update around that, on how that program panned out, or if that's still something that's kind of being rolled out and tested around the region, because I know that broadband's tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had 3 pilot projects, so we ended up deploying about 90 dishes nice. Across. We tracked with them. The pilot program was built around, we were trying to find lower income senior citizen houses that could leverage the connectivity to increase access to telehealth. Each project got better as we kind of figured out what worked best. It culminated into a project with the Redbird Mission, which is a private school that is kind of at the intersection of Clay, Bell, and Leslie County, kind of way out there. And actually, guys, it's really cool. Like, we did a story, the Starlink connectivity, it ended up saving a life at Redbird Mission. They were playing a basketball game, so like their campus was disconnected, and they have trouble with their lines go down, so the only way to communicate between the gym and the school was via this walkie-talkie link, and that wasn't working either. So long story short, a gentleman in the stands ended up having a heart attack, and had they not had that connectivity to be able to radio it in, it really did say. So it's pretty cool. So all that to say, like, it was a small level of projects, but what it proved is you can go as far out as you can get in Eastern Kentucky. Go to the homes at the head of the holler, as deep into the communities. And as long as you have somewhere to plug that dish in, and as long as it can see the sky, that home's going to have internet, right? Now, there's other issues with like affordability, like it's expensive, right? Like, even as the costs come down, like but like in terms of like the technology working and it getting better, it's really good. And it's a tremendous option for those homes that are, again, way out there, where they could drive up the cost of like a traditional fiber project to levels where it might prevent 60 other homes that the project can serve. They can't do it because this one house is way over here, and it makes it unsustainable, if that makes sense. So like, It has to be included as part of the mix when we're thinking about giving access to broadband internet to every home across the county, across the state. Like, they're not in competition, right? Like, they can coexist together. So those projects were really cool.
Yeah, I think that it's getting even more attention right now because Eastern Kentucky is kind of like the sort of, I guess, target market that you would think of when, you hear about all these billions of dollars that were allocated by the the federal government, I forget exactly which bill it was through, but to establish broadband and connect so many more homes. But when you get into the cost of actually running that line out to communities like what we have in Eastern Kentucky, one, it's just incredibly expensive and hard to do. But then you saw how much money was spent and not a home was connected in some of these instances. And it's like,
Well,
subsidize the Starlink.
yeah,
in this case.
to their credit, the money is coming. So, I would expect Kentucky's portal to open up for applications at the beginning of next year. There's been a lot of people work. It's a complicated issue, and you're trying to protect to make sure that you're prioritizing these hard to reach places so they don't get left out again.
Yep.
So there's just a lot of hoops. And like, to your point, Logan, like building in some of these places is hard. And the reality is even if you take trying to build out somewhere and you give somebody 100% of the money up front for construction, they may not have a business case because just operating the network may not cover, like it still may be unaffordable even when you've built it for them. So there's a lot going on there. The money will flow. It will be helpful, but I definitely, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think you have to have a healthy mix of Starlink and some of those emerging technologies, because it's actually going to help you spend those dollars more efficiently on the fiber dollars, because it helps control for some of these way out there homes where you might have to, you don't have to build fiber, take a fiber line over a mountain or under a mountain, because you're able to serve them with the dish, and that technology is getting better, and you can focus your fiber, construction in areas where it is better and there is more density and there are more clusters of homes. So it's kind of both of those, but yeah, it's been a long time coming, but it's a really complicated, expensive problem.
I'm curious if you can talk about the effect of geography and really, I guess, topography of the region that makes it hard for economic development. We just spent some time in Pikeville, which seems to be one of the more developed cities there in Eastern Kentucky. And one thing that really stood out to me was Pikeville was a really nice city. There were some really great things. It was really charming. There were plenty of amenities, but they obviously have run into the natural geography and not being able to expand. And with there being, such a mountainous region there, and, the difficulty of having no areas to expand in a lot of Eastern Kentucky without going up the side of a mountain, which has all kinds of issues, how much study has been done on, the economic impact of that? And are there, maybe some ratios of, certain size cities with certain populations can attract these kind of businesses? And have you guys, thought about that, and maybe what can you share on that front? Because that seems like just one of the biggest underlying fundamental issues is just the landscape.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt it is, Evan, and I'll kind of give my 2 cents on that, which has just been sculpted by my 4 years being in the region, right? Working. I'm sure there are people that have studied this writ large and can give you much more specific numbers. I mean, I think the point you're making, though, is why we're, again, another point for why we're so high on remote work, right? Which is every home can double down as an office, right? Like in a land where flat land is at a premium, right? And where land to be developed is really hard to get ready for development. It means that if you can just get internet to every home, that there's a chance that that home could then have access to economic opportunity, that they're not just dependent on going, finding a road and driving into town where you have a big fat, like we have to be realistic. Like it is hard. So it's the lack of flat land. Most of the flat land that you see, right, in the deep eastern part of the state is because it was formerly strip mined, right? So, which, there's lots of opinions on that. I can just tell you, I've heard both sides that, almost nobody wants to see the natural beauty of the region taken away. But at the same time, like the neighborhoods you see, the subdivisions, I mean, most of those are there because that was former land that was strip mined and it's flat. But then too, like land that where strip mines were, like it doesn't settle properly the way I understand it. So sometimes it's not suitable to build on because of what happened underneath it. So even when you see flat land, Evan, there has to be extensive testing done to make sure that it can be suitable to put a building on. And guess what? Every time you have to run a test, every time you have to do more engineering, That's more costs. That's less of a reason to do the project there. It makes the cost of infrastructure. So when you think about building water lines or sewer or even transmission lines, and you do that up mountains, like, so yeah, not being negative, but there are a lot of challenges when you think about traditionally how people think about economic and community development. There still will be, but again, I think it's why we double down on why the internet, like, I'm not saying the internet solves everything, but like that infrastructure maybe makes the other infrastructure a little less important, because you get that one right, and it can help in areas where the others like can't. And anyway, so it's a huge obstacle in the region,
Yeah.
Evan.
As you talk through some of these programs, I'm hearing some themes of things that we talked about last time, and it seems like a lot of those are connected to what this program is going to entail with the Recompete pilot here. Can you just give us a sense of how all of this is kind of becoming integrated? Because it sounds like a lot of this is going to help support a lot of the programs and a lot of the direction you guys were already looking in general. So just, I guess, kind of give us more of an overview on the different initiatives and programs that this program is targeted at here.
Yeah, let me take a stab at that. I guess I would say, right, like, there's a lot of ways that people, like, if you talk to somebody that's never been to Eastern Kentucky before, and you said, like, okay, I'm going to set this region down in front of you, like, research and tell me like how you think it's doing, or like build an economic profile, or like give me an analysis of maybe how prosperous, like, you could ask the question a million different ways. They would look at a budget. They would look at, per capita income's low, median household income's low, like high poverty rates, like low life expectancy. Like there's a lot of, most of your census markers for the region, especially for the counties that have been most negatively impacted by coal, like the numbers aren't great where we are today. We know that. So it's easy, I guess, and I'm coming back to the question, Logan. I guess it's easy to like take that and like get overwhelmed. I mean, I know I got overwhelmed. Like I still get overwhelmed at some parts, because like the need is so great. The number of people are so great. The place is so big. It's so hard to find people. Like it's so expensive. I mean, there's just all these things factor, but like ultimately what I find solace in, and ultimately where the change has to like happen, how it has to happen. And what I tell my team is like, just one person at a time, one person at a time. The only way this place is going to get better, this region is going to improve over time. The only way communities are going to get stronger, the only ways we're going to increase our tax base, the only way we're going to increase our population is helping the person in front of us, and trying to do that as many times as we can at the level, but like one person at a time. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but like that's exactly what we're trying to do with this project. I mean, we know the whole is huge. It's 34,000 people just in these 12 counties. If you extend that out into the larger part of our territory, I mean, you start getting into over 50,000 people in this gap that need work, that are outside. It's growing every day. And like, we just have to stay focused on helping, one person at a time. So as this project goes live, Logan, early next year, right now we're doing a lot of the foundational stuff. We're getting our offices set up. We're hiring folks. We're getting processes built out. We're getting some evaluators on board, so they're with us from the beginning. Cause like, we really want to know, right? Like, we don't want to spend $50 million and at the end of 5 years be inconclusive if we were able to make a difference. Right. So like, we're really trying to be rigorous in how do we evaluate ourselves. Cause like, we feel like, what's worse than not making a difference is like not knowing if you made a difference. Like that's a big, and like you can make an argument, a lot of the programs that have been designed to like chip away at generational poverty, like the outcomes or the takeaways are maybe inconclusive at best. And so we're doing a lot of that work, but like ultimately when we get down to it and how we're building, like you can only scale so much. Like somebody that's trying to get back into the workforce that faces different, like you can't cut shortcuts. You've got to build relationships with people. You've got to get to know them. You've got to be there for them when they inevitably take steps back, right? And still show up for them. You've got to be proactive. You got to fight for them, man. I mean, the closest thing that I can think of is like what I got from my parents, right? And just how they were there for me as I navigated all these life, as you grow up and you're navigating life decisions and you make mistakes. Like I always had, and I was grateful. I know not everybody had, but like, I'm not saying we're going to be moms and dads to these people, but like, we're going to stay on them. Like, we're not going to give up on them. Like, And if they fail 3 times or 4 times and they keep coming through the door, like, we're going to try to help them again, because like, that's just what it's going to take to dig ourselves out of this hole. So that's what I'm saying. Like, as cool as all this programming is and the training, like, we feel like we have good vision, but we've grounded it in like what's feasible for the area too. Like, it's not just pie in the sky stuff. We feel like it's stuff that we can do, but ultimately it's going to come back to like building the support ecosystem, building the army around each one of these clients that like has raised their hand and said like, I'm ready to be helped. Like, I want something better for myself. I want something better for my family. Like, I'm willing. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to go. Can you help me? And they're just going to have to come to one place to get that robust level of support they need to take that next step for the rest of their life. Might sound, it is aspirational. It's going to be really messy when we get into it, but like, that's like the heart of what we're trying to do. And that's the common thread through all of it.
Well, you have to have the aspiration and the vision of a grander thing before you can even get to the smaller parts where you're taking the first steps. You gotta be looking in the right direction. It excites me to hear a lot of what you're saying. Being from that region and being familiar with a lot of what you're talking about. I'd love to talk about some of the other programs that you guys are working on to attract private investment into the area. I know you and I have talked a lot about entrepreneurial growth in Eastern Kentucky, both from like a small business perspective and from like an innovation ecosystem and startup perspective. Tell us about some of what you guys are focusing on in that realm, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and how you guys are approaching that in the region.
Well, it's a big piece of this. I mean, I think, and just in terms of investment in general, I'm assuming you guys would agree with me. Like, government is not the answer. It should be a catalyst, right? But when you think about the size and the scale of the opportunity gaps we have in the region, like, the only way we're going to, like, we have to unleash the free market, the capitalist machine that really built America into what it is. And there's a cyclical nature, and like, it hurts. Like, what do they call it? The creative destruction of capitalism, right? Where you go in these cycles, and when you look at it over a long period of time, they're just like blips. But when you're in one of those blips, it hurts. It's painful. And I think that's what we're experiencing in Eastern Kentucky. But that can't mean like we stop trying to find ways to get really smart, business forward people that are profit motivated, because being profit motivated is not a bad thing, right? That's what we need. If you can find a way to run a sustainable business and pay the bills and pay your people, like, we need more of those people with strong voices in the region. Like, we can't have, that's what we need more of. So we're always trying to think of creative ways to give people carrots to get here. I mean, I know this sounds simple, but like, the question of like, how can I make money there? Like, if you can show people a way to make money, like, typically that's a pretty good way of attracting entrepreneurs there and attracting businesses there. And I guess that is one concern that like we have kind of anecdotally, is just some of the things we're hearing from some of the young people that have showed interest in being entrepreneurs, is this phenomena of like somehow being profit motivated is a bad thing. Like, somehow that folks want to instead start a nonprofit, which I'm talking to you from a nonprofit. That's not a bad thing, but it feels like we have to remind people that like, no, like, you wanting to start whatever business you have and make money and have big ambition for yourself, that's exactly like, we need that next generation of wealth in the region. Like, we've been so fortunate to have this kind of titan class of folks that built up great legacies in this industrial side of the business. But like, there is a gap. Like, where's that next generation of wealth going to come from in the region? And like, you're only going to do that by attracting that type of entrepreneur. So, we're doing some things, Logan and Evan, obviously we're excited. We're not directly attacked. Like, there's a new angel fund that's formed in the region. It's its own separate LLC. It broke escrow last week. I think that right now they've got somewhere around $600,000 raised, and they're starting to evaluate deals. I don't have to tell you guys know to me how important risk capital is in that ecosystem as ventures are getting off the ground. A lot of folks, we hear all the time from folks that are starting businesses, I wish grants were out there to help people start businesses, but most for-profit businesses are not eligible for grants. You've got to go find financing somewhere else. You guys know traditional bank financing, I mean, they have no risk associated with that. So we've always had a capital access gap. I know you guys talk about it across the state. It's very acute in Eastern Kentucky. If Lexington and Louisville has an issue, then you can only imagine the challenges that somebody in Knott County would face. trying to get a something that could grow and be scalable and create chunks of jobs. So that's what we're focused on is kind of plugging in, giving folks the technical assistance, building that ecosystem. But we're really focused on that high growth, scalable startup because I told you the jobs deficit we're at and how much we need. So it's not that like we're against small business or against SME, but as part of the KY Innovation Network, we're after the home run hitters, and it's risky. But the nice part is if you can land one or two of them, they can have a really big impact. And then people start building around them, right? And what it means for the entire supply chain. So we're excited about the Angel Fund and having that as a resource in the area. We're excited about our programming. We've got an application open for an entrepreneur in residence. We're really trying to get connected to folks that bring that technical level of expertise to introduce to more funders and stuff like that. We're trying to do it the right way, guys. We're really trying to build it the right way, and we're really grateful for KY Innovation and for us being the hub in the eastern part of the state.
Yeah, it is. It's something that Evan and I have been talking about a lot. Just how do you go about, building a startup ecosystem in a place like Eastern Kentucky? How do you make it clear that we want to support small business because that's so essential in any economy, the amount of jobs that are made up from small businesses, but also trying to embed it into the culture of it's not necessarily something you can teach, but it is something that you can expose people to, like a different way of thinking in a way. And there's just entirely different ways of supporting the two types of entrepreneurship. So it is encouraging to hear, both of those kind of being supported and programs and thought through, not only in Louisville and Lexington, but in different parts of the state as well. Evan, you mentioned wanted to discuss some stuff about the summit. I'll pass it over to you real quick on that front.
Yeah, we last time we were over there in Eastern Kentucky, I mentioned Pikeville. You guys threw an awesome summit. I assume that's where you put a lot of your programs out in front of the community and bring those entrepreneurs and those that are big and into the industry there in Eastern Kentucky and put them on display. Talk to us about that strategy and learnings and successes from that SOAR Summit that you put on.
Well, obviously the event is a first-class event. I think it's Central Appalachia's keynote event. You guys put on events. You guys know how hard any size event is, but the logistics that go, it's just a lot. And so I'm really fortunate to have a cool team. We did it a little bit different in Pikeville this year. Typically we have everything contained in kind of one location at the arena there, but to your point, Evan, Pikeville is such a beautiful downtown and it's super walkable and concentrated. We wanted people to get out and take part in things at UPike, take part in things at the arena, also and walk around and enjoy. And we had beautiful weather. So it really worked. We had a range of programming. I forget, I think we had over 100 speakers. So we probably bit off a little more than we could chew this year in terms of the content, but there were some really interesting conversations happening, and entrepreneurship was a big piece of that. Nate Morris was one of our keynote speakers, and he's got a pretty incredible story. He spent time, I think, with that entrepreneur roundtable, some of those folks that were there that you guys interacted with, and it's just really good. I'm not building a business in the region. I know those folks are. I have a lot of respect for them because building a business anywhere is hard. I think trying to do it in our region, there's just so many things you have to deal with and contend with that folks in other parts, larger cities, don't have to deal with. So their passion to trying to do it in a place where they're from and they care about is huge. I think some of the themes, and Evan, you might be able to speak. I think access to capital was brought up in a big way. I think mainly just getting access to that technical expertise of funders and the folks that they know to kind of really help take their product to the next level and help them access markets like potential customers. I think that's a challenge here, right? Because we don't have any power users. It'd be a great place for a health tech startup, device startup, because we do have a lot of hospital systems. We have folks that could be potential patients. I think for other manufacturing related businesses or other verticals, you don't have a healthy base of folks where you can get started and get in and kind of tinker with stuff and build it. So I think those were some of the comments that came out of it. But I think what's cool is there are some pretty cool, fast growing businesses in the region. We have a handful of really promising startups that are actively raising, that are building, that are adding customers. And it's hard because our region's so big, it's just easy. There's just a lot of physical distance. So the summit's a great way, and we hope to do more programming where you bring them together in one place. You have some of that networking where they talk amongst themselves. It's kind of cathartic. I'm sure they share kind of some of their war stories. But you guys do those events, right, where you bring everybody in the room and you just get that energy that it's just you can't replicate over a webinar or over online. And so the summit helps there in that specific setting, but across the board when you get 1,500 people in a small place and a lot of those conversations. So we were so glad to have you guys. It was a fun event. It's a lot, and I tell you what, we always sleep really well that night once it's over, because it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, there's nothing easy about throwing events and getting people in the same physical location. It just takes a lot of work, no matter what you do with it. But as we wrap up here, and we think about the future and the vision, and you guys have gotten this grant and this funding to support what you all are doing. When we sit down in another 4 years on down the road, talk about what kind of milestones you hope to be able to look back on and be celebrating in 4 years from now.
Well, I'm gonna change your 4 years to 5, because that's the implementation period of this grant. So really, I'm thinking everything like it's like pre-EDA, post-EDA, like during the 5 years and after the 5 years. So that's kind of like what I'm building towards and thinking about. So like obviously you think a lot about it, because like I'll be honest, like I don't like what happens day 1801 if there's 1800 days in 5 years. Like I don't think like what we'll look to sustain, I don't think it'll be exactly what we're doing over the next 5 years. Like my goal won't be to fill a $44 million hole, right? Like it's big. I think are we able to tinker and do things and measure it and show promising signs of what has worked best, and then make that continue moving forward. So I think there's some practical ways that we're looking at our projects and programs and the new ways of doing things. But honestly, like Logan, I've been telling my team, right? Like if we're successful, if we do the right things, like if we really focus in the short term and our intentions are good and we're going about this the right way and we're getting the results and we're making changes when necessary, like the future is going to take care of itself, right? Like it's so hard to like look out ahead and like paint. Like you have to stay focused in the present of just get the job done today and do that day after day, week after week, month after month, and it's gonna come together. But I would say something that I'm really working on, right? And like what I would judge success is like, and at the end of 5 years, like have we really? There's a lot of really big time funders, philanthropies, corporate partners that are interested in like social and economic mobility for the types of folks that we're going to be helping, and like what it means for other groups across the country. So like at the end of 5 years, do we have a Gates Foundation? Do we have a Walton Family Foundation? Have we drawn their interest in this region because some of the good things we've done and what it means again for other parts of the country that are dealing with this? So like there's a lot of ways that we're thinking about that. At the end of the day, I hope every client that has an experience with us, they say, you know what, they treated me well. They followed up. They were on it. Like I felt like I was a priority. So like I think we're looking at it in a lot of different ways, but we're trying to like one person at a time to go back to that and make sure it's grounded in that.
That's how you have to do it when you're taking on something as large as what you guys are aiming to do here. And man, I'll just say there's nobody I'd rather have at the helm of it than you, and excited for you guys to get things underway. I know that I'm sure you're eager to really hit the ground running with this grant. So appreciate you coming on to talk about everything, and congratulations again on all of this. For those listening and are feeling inspired by what SOAR's working on, how can individuals or businesses contribute to the success of some of these initiatives?
Yeah, so stay obviously, our website, www.soar-ky.org. I think my email, colby.hall@soar-ky.org. I'd love to hear from anybody. Our project website is eKYrunway.com. So we've got a shell, we've got a first phase of the website up, and we're going to be working on that over time. I'll plug real quick. It's not live yet, Logan, but we're going to be starting a fund associated with the project where folks can donate. We know that a lot of our clients that come through, they're going to have a lot of what we call last mile costs. So the costs associated of going into new training, or of paying for the childcare that's going to allow you to go to training, or paying for gas, or paying for supplies, or fixing a flat tire. We know there's going to be a range of like financial obligations that could be the difference between somebody staying where they are and somebody progressing into employment. And so I think in 2025 early, we're going to establish a way where folks that are looking to give to a worthy cause, a nonprofit, if they want to give $50, $15, $5, they're going to be able to contribute to that. That's going to be given to real people that are trying to make the decisions and go about the work to make themselves a better version of themselves. And 100% of those proceeds will go towards filling gaps and filling needs like that. So I don't have it up yet. More to come. Maybe you can share that out to your listeners and across your social media channels when we have that going. But that'll be a great way for folks that are interested in the project, that are looking to give, any level of support would be great. We're going to pull it there and we're going to get it out to the people that need it.
I love it that you guys are thinking ahead of that sort of stuff already. So we'll definitely be sure to put a word out about that whenever that comes up. But Colby, man, thanks again for coming on. I hope you have a great Christmas with your family and a happy new year. And we'll look forward to staying up to date with what you guys are working on, and excited to see things get underway.
Well, thanks for having me again, guys. It's as fun as always. And I'll be sure to keep in touch and let you guys know how everything's going.
Awesome, man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.